Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove, and today we'll be talking about number and meaning. Mathematicians think of number as being pure abstract expressions of quantity, yet is it possible that numbers also have a qualitative dimension? With me today is Arthur M. Young, the developer of a theory of process which integrates all of the sciences with spiritual experience, mythology, and psychic abilities. According to this theory, the meanings associated with number are absolutely crucial. Arthur Young is also the inventor of the Bell helicopter, the first commercially licensed helicopter, and he's the founder of the Institute for the Study of Consciousness, located in Berkeley, California. In addition, he's the author of numerous books, including The Reflexive Universe, The Geometry of Meaning, and Which Way Out. Welcome, Arthur. It's a pleasure to be with you again. You know, when we think of number, I suppose one can think of the whole universe as being the essential unity of things, and from there it begins to divide and become multiple and complex, and all of the numbers then are used in describing the universe. In your theory, which is really too detailed to go into in all of its aspects today, numbers play a key element, particularly the idea that numbers have a qualitative aspect to them and reflect the qualities really of human lives. Isn't that the case?
Yes.
What would you say is the fundamental meaning or quality of a number? Like, let's say the number is 1, 2, 3, 4?
Well, if you put it the other way around, how do we get meaning out of a word like, say, duality, contest, coordination, duplicity? These words require the number 2, otherwise you wouldn't know what the person was talking about.
Uh-huh. Now, I know the prefix do, it would have to do with 2, is also co.
Right. Cooperate.
Sure.
There has to be 2 things to cooperate.
That's right.
Contest, you have to have 2 sides.
Mm-hmm.
So the number 2 gives the meaning of opposition, or 2 things. And number 3 has a different connotation. It leads to things like motion, or continuity. Anything where there are 2 states with something in between. Without something in between, you couldn't get from one to the other.
So if you just have 2 states, it's like positive and negative. There's no middle ground.
That's a duality, yes.
When you have 3, now you're beginning to talk about something that's more continuous.
The eternal triangle, for instance, is continually moving.
Mm-hmm.
The 3-ness is always associated with some kind of motion or instability or even stability.
Uh-huh. Like the triangle is
Yes.
a very stable form.
Well, it's also moving.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
yes, go ahead.
4-ness takes it a step further.
Mm-hmm.
That's where people break down, because they're used to thinking in terms of dualities. Good and bad and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But there always has to be something that mediates a duality. For instance, if there are 2 contestants go to court, they expect the judge to make an impartial judgment. And this means the judge occupies he doesn't side with one or the other. And that means another axis which cuts across the axis of the duality.
Another dimension, so to speak.
Right.
The judge has to stand above.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the court and the law, so the judge isn't alone in this. The judge has to interpret the law and apply it to the case at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I need to, we haven't much time. I'd like to go into 4-ness.
Okay, but the notion of the judge, just to go back to it for a moment, that relates again to the number of 3 then, the 2 parties and then the mediating principle.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, fourness is something I'd like to focus in on a lot too, because I know it's essential to your theory and also to the works of great thinkers like Aristotle and Descartes and in previous generations.
Well, I'm thinking of what I wasn't going to say, that the Solomon and the two wives was a good example of fourness, because both claimed possession of the baby. And he proposed to cut the baby in two and give them each half. And one of them said, okay, and the other said, oh no, I'd rather the other woman had the baby. Well, he right away recognized the true mother, because the issue of love was created by his creating this new thing of cutting the baby in two. That would give them possession, but it would deprive the baby of its being. So the difference between having and being, or loving and owning, the true mother was ready to give up the owning for the benefit of the baby.
It also suggests to me that when we talk about being, we're again coming back to the number one.
Well, and that's the overriding number, but again it has to divide
Yes.
in order to create the meanings of things. If you want to get very subtle, non-being is thought in tradition, but I won't try to press that now.
Okay. So let's focus in on the number 4. The fourfold nature of the universe is quite crucial to your theory, isn't it?
Well, it's easy enough to say, well, the four directions, gods of the four directions, and even to talk about the four elements as the ancients did.
Earth, air, fire, and water.
Right. Or the four faculties, or the four causes of Aristotle, or the four saints, or there are hundreds of references. Thing is to get to the meaning. And there's one example I like to use for that. If you were lost and I gave you a map, what else would you need?
I probably need a compass.
Well, a compass, yes. Most people don't think of that right away, but what else?
I would need to know where I am on
Right.
the map. I'd have to have some reference point.
And there's one other that is rather difficult. You'd have to know the scale of the map, because a map of the world wouldn't do you any good if you were lost in the streets of San Francisco.
Right.
Well, these four features or aspects of the situation. See, the map explains where everything is with respect to something else. It's a relationship structure. But the compass relates it to the whole. The compass tells you where north is. And it's impossible to put the compass in the map. You can have this little arrow that says, but then you have to have a compass to know which way the arrow is pointing. And then, of course, the map says 2 miles to the inch or something like that. That would give you the scale, but you need a physical object to measure inches. You can't do it in the abstract.
So these are 4 different qualities: the compass, the map, the scale, and the position where you are.
The position where you are, of course, is essential too. Reminds me of my wife was lost in Washington. She got a map from the filling station attendant, and then she asked him, well, where are we on the map? He didn't know. So the map wasn't much help.
Yeah.
Now, these 4 different aspects of the map are known through our different functions or faculties. Sensation is how we'd know we're right here. And mind is our relation to other things. And emotion, you have to enlarge your notion of feeling, but it has to do with scale. You see, if something is close to you, it might induce fear.
Yes.
And if something is very small, you're confident. So there's a size relation to emotion. And the last one is the compass. It's the intuition, you see. So you really wouldn't need anything if you just accept a compass. If you always had the compass and always went by the compass, you wouldn't need the map. But you need a map to know other things besides where you're going.
You need a map to have a sense of the context
Right,
where you are.
right.
Yes.
Right, but I mean if you just went purely by your intuition,
Purely by intuition.
you might sort of fly like a bird to the right place, but you wouldn't know anything else.
Yeah.
This gets into the question of why are we here? And-
Because obviously we're as beautiful as birds are, and the animals are with their instincts and in their intuitions. We're more than that,
well, we
for better
wanna-
or worse.
We want to analyze things, take them apart,
Yeah.
and that too has its value, because by taking one thing apart, you can learn about many things. So this is another reason for the division. We didn't say why the universe had to be divided, but that gets to it. It divides it up so you can see how it fits together and put it back.
That seems like a very profound thought. It's as if the universe is dividing up so that it can only return to its original unity.
Well, that is essentially what I try to deal with in process, the descent into matter, which is to say into the division of things, and then the ascent back again to the unity.
Let's focus in on that because it's a classic concept that appears in most of perhaps all of the mythological cycles of the various cultures and societies on our planet, the notion of the descent of spirit into matter.
Right.
And you have mapped this out in your theory of process and are seemingly able to look at it in a very scientific way, and it involves the elements of number, particularly the fourness.
Well, if you can get the quality of the number, the sort of feeling about the number, it helps make the whole thing quite clear. Curiously enough, the first division is into 3, and I'll get back to why later.
Okay.
But the 3 begins the motion, the waters of the deep, and so forth, and describes what I call the second level, which is where you always are longing for something, or imagining something, or feeling something. The infant begins by wanting its mother's breast, and so on. We don't know how to measure things. We're just at the mercy of these longings. It isn't until the next step where you get the fourfold. Fourfold comes in at level 3, and it's the stop and think point. In almost all the myths, they have a immobilized tree god to represent this stop and think. The motion that was characteristic of the previous one has to stop, because otherwise you're lost in the motion.
You've lost
You
me
look
a little
puzzled.
bit. I am a little puzzled, and I think it happened when you said that the fourfold emerges out of level 3.
Right. The fourfold is at level 3, where you can form concepts, measure things, and talk about ideas.
Let's start at level 1 once more. If we think of spirit as being purely something unitary, that would be associated with the first.
It's very difficult to think about spirit because our thinking function wants concepts and plans.
Yes.
It is the thing that does the thinking, so you can't ever put your eye out there and look at it. And one way I think of the present moment is full of spirit, because you don't know what it is. It's always different. See, if you try to say what the present is, you can't do it. As soon as you've described it, it's gone.
It's either in the past or it's about to be in the
Right,
future. And of course, the past and the future don't seem to exist either.
Well, that again, the past and the future and the present make the 3-ness of level 2. The present comes from the oneness of spirit, and then the 2-ness makes past and future, but you're in between.
I see.
Your
So the
spirit
first
is in-
level, which reflects oneness, in effect also reflects nothingness.
Right. You could say that, yes.
The second level, which has to do with duality, with the opposing forces, I suppose, the electrons, the negative forces, and the protons, the positive forces, it has to do with
This
3.
is very subtle. I hope we can... Let me get to it a little bit later.
Okay, I may be jumping ahead a
Right.
bit.
We didn't do the bottom level, the fourth.
No,
floor.
we haven't gotten there yet.
Well, let me go back a little to the longing. The longing gives the substance of life, the value, the things you like and dislike.
And the
things
longing
that are
emerges from
worthwhile.
the unity of things.
The worthwhileness. But the intellectual doesn't give you any worthwhileness. It just compares sizes,
Yes.
gives you the measurements.
And it emerges from the longing.
Right, because after you've had more than one longing, you begin to wonder, well, which girl do I like best? But you have to stop being immediately in love if you're going to compare the two. And that creates this other space, which is the two-dimensionality.
You
of
become like the
furniture.
judge, and
Right,
you will
right.
become more impartial. You enter
Right.
into another dimensionality of impartiality in this
Right.
situation.
Right.
So we're at the third level
Well, now how
now of
do we get to the
analyzing
fourth, you
intellectually.
see?
Yes.
The fourth is when you put the substance into the concept, like putting the wine into the bottle. You begin to have real things to work with. And then two people can't sit in the same chair, or two cars can't cross the same intersection at the same time. You have to have laws to deal with this matter.
So we've moved from the realm of intellect and comparison into
right.
basically into the physical universe.
And the physical universe is this fourth level. And the fact that it's all divided is part of what makes it interesting.
So let me just summarize this. When we talk about the descent of spirit, then we're moving from a level of unitary consciousness to a level of longing, a level of yearning, and from there to a level of comparing, analyzing,
Thinking,
intellect, and then from there into the concrete physical plane. And those are the four stages
those
of
are
the
the four,
descent
right.
of spirit. And now let me point out that they also seem to relate to the principles of physics, from the unitary level of light to the
Right.
level of particles and duality, positive and negative, to
Right.
then you compare the level of thought to being the realm of atoms, and the concrete material level to that of molecules.
Well, we still have more to go.
Yes.
What happens now, next?
Well, the second part of the mythological cycle, after
Right.
we've dealt with the descent of spirit into matter, of course, is the ascent of matter back to spirit. And
Right.
that also has four levels for you.
Well, they're the same four levels, but you go back through them. But what is the critical point that makes the turn, as it were,
The turning point.
from
yeah.
going down to going back up?
Well, that would be life itself.
Well, in the mythology, it's almost always, in fact, referred to as a virgin birth. And that's because a virgin birth is a birth that has no prior cause. Anything that has a cause is mechanical, just as one of a series of links. But the true ascent has to start with your own volition, your own choice, not somebody telling you to do it. That's why spirit is so important, is because it's not owing to this or owing to that to make more money. You don't go to heaven to make more money, or you don't make more money to go to heaven. There's no cause and effect of the normal kind there. Well,
So at some level we reach deeply inside of ourselves, and it's from that core, I suppose, that initial impulse, that unity,
Right.
that inspires us to move back through the four levels.
and also, since spirit inspired the descent, the spirit may get what it needs, may realize that it's gotten what it needs, and not have to go on grinding deeper and deeper into the mire.
I suppose, in one sense, if we were to view the ascent of spirit, of matter, really, into spirit, we might say, well, we can start with the virus. That's a very simple level, and then move up through plants and animals and humans. It's really the structure of evolution
Right.
itself.
Well, now I
And
want
again,
to
we
go
have four
back
levels there.
to, remember I stopped you when you said duality?
Yes.
And I said the second level is threeness.
Yes.
So what happened to the two-ness? This is where even esoteric thought can get instruction from physics, because what physics has found is that the pair creation which creates matter, light producing particles, does not produce a proton and an electron, a biggie and a little. It creates two biggies. One is an antiproton and it disappears. Nobody knows what happens to it. And then when it produces the little one, the electron, it produces a positron too, which is the counterpart, but with a different charge, and that disappears. Now that's what the one physicist has speculated, that the antimatter, the reason it disappears is that time goes backward toward it. And this is a beautiful solution. I don't know whether it's correct, but it's theoretically very good. It fits the theory too. But if you think of the time going backwards, it's no wonder the antimatter disappears. Well, at the point, the virgin birth point, and this is very important for an inventor. Let me give one illustration.
Okay.
My uncle invented sun motors, and he had a mercury boiler. And the mechanic complained when he put it together that the valve floated in the mercury. It closed instead of opening. So my uncle said, turn it upside down. He did, and it worked. Often you find that what you tried to do works backwards. Well, if that's the case, you turn yourself around and run it the other way. Then this working, you've got the law that this thing obeys. While it's contrary to what you thought it should be, you can still take advantage of it.
And this is the notion that when you wrote your book, The Reflexive Universe, this is the
Right.
basic reflex that you're
Right.
talking about, moving
Right.
from the descent of spirit to the ascent of matter.
Well, this involves reversing time. Now, this may tax your credulity, but when you think about cause and effect, see, normally we say that the fire causes the smoke. But inference says, smoke, there must be a fire someplace. In other words, you're going from the effect back to the cause.
Yes.
You see the smoke, and there must be a fire someplace. Did you drop something or something? I mean, you start looking. Well, that's using in imagination, putting in the cause that you can't see.
In other words, orienting ourselves towards a
Right.
purpose somehow.
And that is the inversion that had occurred way back when the antiparticle was created. But at that point, it was unfruitful. You have to wait till you're right in the middle of matter and then get the inversion. And then you have the possibility of beginning the ascent. Because if you begin the ascent too soon, you will defeat the purpose of the descent.
Well, I'm not sure how all of this relates to antiparticles.
Oh, you don't see that?
No.
Well, if the antiparticles go back in time, then you have a precedent for something, for time going backwards.
Oh.
And that precedent is reaffirmed when you think back to what caused the situation you're in. I don't know that there really shouldn't be anything difficult about that, except perhaps you're not used to it.
No, and well, you know, this is part of your theory. It is kind of, it runs against the grain of so many of the ways we've been educated in our culture. But I guess the point basically is that something happens that changes our orientation. It's as if our free will becomes involved, or we don't keep descending once we're in the...
Well, all right, take it back to the myth. Now, you see, the myths are so outrageous that you have to think about it, and what do they mean? Now, the myth of Kronos was time.
Yes, in the Greek
and he
mythology.
ruled instead, I won't give the whole thing, but it's all instructive. He was going to eat his own children, and time consumes what it creates, you see. But Rhea didn't like this. Rhea was his wife. And rather than let Kronos eat the child, Zeus in Greek, but Jupiter in Latin, she wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes, and by this ruse deceived time. You see, it's like my uncle turning the thing around backwards.
Yeah.
She recognized the law, so okay, do what the law says, but Zeus, you get along. And Zeus escaped. Well, I think this has to do with just what you were mentioning about the virus, how life begins. Life begins by recognizing the law and using it to climb out.
In other words, it's as if there's the trickster function
Right,
is involved here. Once matter has become sufficiently intelligent, even at a virus level, it begins to play a little trick, and out of that we have evolved.
If you like, and one person said it's not kosher, but it isn't a moral question, it's a question of understanding. If you jump out the window and try to fly with your hands and fall on your face, it's not tricky to put on wings, it's sensible. Because you have to deal with things as they are.
Yeah. Arthur, we only have about a minute, but I wonder if that would be sufficient time for you just to elaborate again the forness function as it relates to the ascent.
Well, I could do it with a dollar bill. On the dollar bill, there's a forness in the pyramid with its firm base in matter and an eye hovering above the pyramid. The eye could be this fifth element that sees the relationship of the four, and I think it's about to alight now, but let's hope that people use their eye to see the consequences of this physical universe.
Well, Arthur M. Young, I know you have spent your entire life looking very deeply into the nature of the universe and have seen quite a lot, and thank you for being with me and sharing that now.
Thank you, Jeff. I had a great evening.
And thank you very much for being with us.